How's it going, guys, and welcome to Gaming Evolved. I'm Shifty Cow, and in today's video we're going to be talking about what can make Battlefield 5 a success when it launches in late 2016. So before we get into it, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like down below, but let's just hop right into it. So in order to be a success, Battlefield 5 needs to do pretty much two things. First of all, it needs to be very cinematic and look cool for things like trailers, and that's going to pull in a lot of new players who are very interested in Battlefield but have really just never touched it. And then you also need to provide some really good core gameplay that a lot of the people who have been in the Battlefield franchise have really just come to expect. So if you're able to create a really nice cinematic experience while still keeping some awesome gameplay, that's going to pull in a ton of people and it'll make this game really successful. I think one of the things that Hardline really didn't do very well was it didn't cater to the more Battlefield veteran type players where they've been playing since like Bad Company 2, and instead it catered more to newer players who wanted some faster action and didn't really like the slowness of regular Battlefield games. So if they're able to cater to both player types, then it should be a very successful game. I think this is probably one of the biggest reasons why Battlefield 4 did so well, especially at launch, because they were able to put out some really cool trailers that showed off the Siege of Shanghai tower coming down, and first of all, that just looks incredible. That's going to get anybody's attention, and so that pulled in a lot of new players, and also the gameplay was very familiar for people who were playing Battlefield 3, and that's going to be intriguing for them. Speaking of Levolution, the destruction in this game really has to be on point, because if you look at games that have kind of flopped like Battlefield Hardline, one of the biggest critiques is that it had very inconsistent destruction and its Levolution events were pretty lacking. But if you look at successful games like say Battlefield 4 or Bad Company 2, they had insane amounts of destruction, but they still had some really nice gameplay that it provided. Sure, there were certain maps where it kind of took away from the map, say like Flood Zone, where you can destroy pretty much all the cover, but I think if they're able to pull this off with a little bit more destruction, it'll be a really nice game. So moving on, one of the most important things about having a successful FPS game is the map design. Now if you look at Battlefield 4, the map design is pretty inconsistent. On some maps it's pretty good, it's got some good pathing and nice cover, but on other maps there's things that really just do not make sense, and I hope they avoid in Battlefield 5. Probably the biggest example of just annoyances in Battlefield 4 is on Hanan Resort on the rooftop. There's only two ways to get up there, and that's by elevators that are both facing each other and can be easily camped out, so hopefully they do avoid things like this by either adding in, say, a third elevator or making the elevators on opposite sides so you can't watch them at the exact same time. But really, it just comes down to whether or not they make their map designers and their art designers kind of collaborate, so that way they can make something that plays out really well but also looks incredibly amazing and it'll be good for trailers. Now, the next item on my list is definitely something that no game can get perfect, but a lot of games can get close, and that is of course game balance. Now, there's still a lot of controversial things in Battlefield 4, whether it's something like indirect fire, the AC-130, AAs, the defensive perk. There's really a ton of things that are super controversial, and there is a way to go about fixing pretty much all of them, but it really depends on how DICE wants to go about developing it and what their aim for certain playstyles are. So we're just going to go over a couple of these real quickly, and feel free to leave a comment telling me what you think, but let's just hop right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the indirect fire gadgets like the UCAV and the mortars, and these already have been adjusted with a 60-second timer before you can actually use them after deploying. And I think an even better fix for this is to just, rather than having them gadgets, you put them on the battlefield as battle pickups, because that way you can control what maps they're on, you can control what game modes they're on, because the UCAV really does break a lot of rush things, and you can also control how often people use them and how many can be used at a certain time. So that's just a lot more control for developers to put in the game, and I think it would really help out the game balance. Moving on, the LAVAD or the AA gun is probably one of the most annoying vehicles in the game, especially when you're trying to fly around in a little bird, a jet, or if you're just running across the map and you get mowed down from the AA when you're in infantry. So it's pretty annoying, and I think a pretty easy fix to this is to either take away a lot of its armor and to have it be similar to a buggy but with a lot more firepower, or to just make so it has map boundaries, so it has to be inside a certain area to be used, and you can't just go to the back of your map and camp, because you really can't do anything about that, and that should be a pretty easy fix. The same goes for the M142 mortar vehicle. It's pretty well balanced, but the only thing is people like to take it into the back of the spawn and camp with it, and you really can't do anything about it, especially on maps like Hanan Resort, so simply adding in some smaller map boundaries could fix a lot of issues. The AC-130 is probably one of the most annoying things because it pretty much has no counters other than jets, and it can only be called in from a commander, which a lot of times there's only one commander in a server, and it leads to some really unbalanced gameplay. So you either have to take it out of the commander's slot because that really just breaks the game, or give it a lot more counters. Make it so that battle pickups can lock onto it, make it so that a lot of gunners on tanks and LAVs do a lot more damage, really just give a lot more options if you want to take it down, because right now it's pretty much get in a jet or get destroyed. Now, pretty much all of these suggestions are based on facts that if they keep things from Battlefield 4 in the game, and we're probably going to see a lot of things removed, added, and just a lot of change in Battlefield 5, and one of the things that I hope to God is removed is the defensive perk. Anytime you win solely because of something you equipped and not something that you use and is skilled, it pretty much is game breaking and it ruins the consistency of aggressive sniping, and it either needs to be a late tier or even better, just removed out of the game completely. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is something that people often overlook when they're thinking about what's going to make a successful game or not, and this is of course hype and advertisement. Now, Battlefield 4 did an amazing job of providing some really cool hype, they showed off some really nice trailers, and they overall did a great job advertising their game. Now, the one problem with this was their launch was absolutely horrible. In terms of sales, they did really well, pretty much solely because of the advertisement, but the actual game was just utter garbage. It really wasn't optimized well, there were a ton of bugs, the netcode was awful, a lot of people had some terrible crashing, it was completely unplayable on certain platforms. But they did fix it eventually, but the problem is you create a lot of dishonesty with this, and people are really hesitant to buy another EA, Visceral, DICE, any game that's related to Battlefield, they had a lot of hesitation to. So it creates a lot of issues, and hopefully Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 5 actually learns from this, and instead of doing something where they hype it up a ton and then have a poor product, they hype it up a decent amount because obviously you need a lot more players, but they create an honest product behind that advertisement, and that way the consumer's happy, the developers are happy because they're going to be selling a lot more, and overall it creates a lot more trust in the company, and that's just going to make a really successful game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video of me just talking about what's going to make Battlefield 5 successful or not. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe as we do post Battlefield content daily, but until next time guys, stay buttery.